My dad, he grew up in a little town, loved school. He wanted to be a teacher. When he was 15, Hitler came to power. He could no longer go to school. He was forced to go work. They realized that they're not going to be able to live in Germany.
In 1930, William B. Thalhimer, a Jewish owner of the prestigious Thalhimer's department store in Richmond, Virginia, traveled to Europe with his wife and 2 sons on a buying trip. In Berlin, he experienced a demonstration of the anti-Semitic brown shirts. He was rocked with fear and vowed to help the Jews of Germany.
Throughout the 1930s, Thalhimer rose to head the committee that resettled German Jewish refugees in the entire United States. In 1938, he developed the idea of purchasing a large farm for the purpose of training Jewish refugees to become farmers, thereby becoming self-sustaining. This is hidden history you will not forget.
Originally named Hyde Park Farm, Hyde Farmlands is located 90 minutes south of Richmond in Burkeville, Virginia. Today, the area is still fairly rural, much like it was in 1938, and a perfect location for Thalhimer's idea. Monty Stokes has been taking care of the property for several years now.
This property dates back to 1752. John Folks built this house. That's the center section over here. The other sections were built in 1906 by another family. It's 863 acres. The place is half a mile wide and runs 2 miles all the way to the Little Nottoway River on the north side. What's interesting about these old houses, if you had money, you would have a ballroom and you would have an entertainment facility. This house had a ballroom that extended from the porch all the way to the left. The red building is an old, basically it was a horse barn. There were 2 or 3 stalls on the other side, and they stored hay on the left side.
Bob Gillette has written 2 books about Thalhimer's and other efforts to rescue German Jewish teenagers. He spent 10 years researching the story that was virtually unknown. Although Thalhimer rose to lead refugee efforts, there was still the hurdle of strict enforcement of American immigration restrictions, as well as the increasing reluctance of countries around the world to accept Jewish refugees. He would write a letter to the Joint Distribution Committee to help refugees come to the U.S., but the letter was not acknowledged.
William B. Thalhimer was the owner of Thalhimer's Brothers Department Store in Richmond, the premier department store in Virginia. In 1930, he said to his wife, Annette, "We're going to Europe on a buying trip." I do think that he wanted to go to Europe with his 2 sons to give them the experience of spreading their wings, so to speak, and learning more about other cultures. It was one evening, he stood in front of the windows trying to get some fresh air, and all of a sudden from down below was like a cacophony of screaming and yelling and drumming. It was the brown shirts, anti-Semitic. And he turned to his family, and his son, Charles, told me that that was the first and only time that he ever saw fear in his father's eyes. And so over the next 10 years, William B. Thalhimer became extraordinarily active in the resettlement of German Jewish refugees. Let's remember that the Jewish community in Germany was getting strangled, but slowly, so that it would strangle and then let go, and strangle some more and let go. In 1933, it was a meeting of all the organizational chair people of the various organizations. It was well-organized Jewish community in Germany. The leader of the German Jewish community, Rabbi Leo Beck, and he got up to speak, and he said, "Gentlemen, the end of Jewish survival in Germany has arrived." And so in 1936, the committee finally said, "We got to get the kids out of here." So they started to set up agricultural training institutes throughout Germany for German Jewish teenagers to teach them agriculture. The main focus was to get them to Palestine, so they were Zionist, but Grossbriesen was non-Zionist.
Dr. Kurt Bondi, a leading adolescent psychologist and professor, was named director of Grossbriesen. Bondi stressed taking responsibility for one's actions, the importance of teamwork, and giving back to the community. These were life lessons.
For a 2-year program, they would train these students in the cutting-edge technology of agriculture with the idea that some country who needs agriculturalists and farmers, would be willing to open the doors and take these people in.
At Brazen, they not only were they learning how to be farmers, at night they studied anything German culture. They had Martin Buber, who was a famous philosopher, came to speak at Brazen.
Eventually, through chance, Thalhimer's farm idea was recognized by the Joint, and he was connected to Bondi. After a 14-month argument with the State Department, he brought 25 Gross-Breeson students to his farm in Burkeville, Virginia.
And what he learned very quickly was that there was a topography of keeping these people out.
The State Department kept out immigrants by saying they would become LPC, likely to become a public charge, which meant they would not be able to financially sustain themselves. But Thalhimer found a way through this.
They realized that Thalhimer would never allow any of the refugees to become a public charge, and that was the key. He came up with a program to give them shares in the Hyde farmlands and the farm and so forth, but after 14 months, 25 German Jewish students who were at Gross-Breeson received visas to come to the United States.
On the farm, the students did much of what they did at Gross-Breeson under the guidance of Dr. Bondi.
They would work hard, work in the fields, growing vegetables, and then they started to settle on the production of chicken and eggs. So they would be clearing wood from the woodlands. They would be using that wood to build 10 chicken houses. William Thalhimer kept working, trying to get refugees, but then he saw no more refugees. Our shores were closed, no one could get out, and that's when he also suffered a heart attack.
In the spring of 1941, immigration from Germany halted. Thalhimer was in poor health, and though the farm had great promise as a modern chicken producer, with no prospect of future refugees and the drain on finances, Hyde Farmlands was closed.
What happened to the students?
All the students had a place to go once the farm closed, but when war broke out, most of the men, all the men, male students, joined the Army. Several of them became Ritchie boys. These were the elite intelligence officers that were attached to all the regiments because they could speak German, they knew German culture. They would be the ones who would interrogate captured German soldiers. They would be the ones that would negotiate surrender and so forth.
How does this story, what does it mean today? What is the relevance to today?
That's the big question. I asked myself, what would Thalhimer think if he heard and saw Charlottesville, storming of the Capitol? How traumatized would he be again? And I think his legacy is a legacy of courage and persistence, resiliency, hope. That's Thalhimer's legacy, his moral legacy. And that's why when I come here, to me, this is a sacred place.
Why is it important to keep the Gross-Breeson and the Hyde farmlands and this entire story and history alive?
I think my father always wanted to keep it alive, especially later in his life. Maybe so that it couldn't happen again, maybe in memory of his brother who never made it out of Germany.
The Hyde farmland story is a true piece of hidden history. It's filled with courage, hope, and resilience, all things we could use in today's world. So the next time you're traveling in Nottoway County, Virginia, why not take a detour and discover the hidden history of Hyde farmlands?